Good evening, everyone. Coming to you from two introverts talking about extroversion and being an ambivert. This should be a very interesting episode.
Oh, I think
Um,
I'm an ambivert.
I would say that I'm an ambivert too, but I'd still also kind of identify as being an introvert, but depends on the situation. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 27 of Restitching the Tapestry. It's
Wow.
hard to believe that we are inching our way close to 30 episodes, so that's really fun to think about. I wonder what we should do something. I mean, obviously every episode is fun, but we should do something extra fun for the 30th episode to kind of commemorate the occasion, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
So before we get on to reading our mission statement, of course, Ari, how have you been doing?
I have been doing great. It's been a great week, and happy to be here. And I'm wearing my Space Girl T-shirt.
Woo! I love it. My week has been pretty good too. It's been a little busy, but in a good way, nothing too extravagant. And of course, the highlight of my week was the Godzilla versus Kong trailer came out, and that's been really getting me through things. So that is something fun to look forward to. In fact, my partner and I have been powering through the MonsterVerse movies, so he's been very patient in dealing with my commentary on everything and explanations and
I,
overexcitement. So
I saw that he was saying something about how it's not King Ghidorah anymore. He's just Ghidorah.
yeah, he was trying to argue Godzilla facts with me, and I literally was like, "Babe, I love you, but I've literally been a fan of this since I was a freaking single cell organism. Like, trust me." Like, he's very good at arguing, so he did make a few good points. So I will at least give him that. But it was very entertaining. Hello, we have Arpy or Leo. I gotta remember it's Leo, not Igny. Leo. And Taylor is joining us from the bathtub. Is it
Ooh.
a bubble bath? That is the very important thing because I love bubble baths. I really miss having bubble baths.
Oh yeah.
One of my favorite things to do. I know this is kind of going off topic, but it's an introverted thing, I suppose. When everybody else is out and about being social, I just love drawing a bubble bath, turning on some meditation music or Enya or something, reading or writing in the bathtub while drinking wine or tea. Like it is literally my favorite thing. Salt bath for my pains. Well, I hope that the salt bath is helping. I know as we get closer and closer to your delivery date, you're probably trying to find ways to alleviate a lot of that. So
Oh no.
getting close. I think you said it was April, right? April, I think, if memory serves correctly. Um, but yeah, welcome. We really appreciate all of you being here. We've been wanting to do this episode for a while, talking about being an ambivert, but we pushed it back a little bit because of all the events happening at the beginning of January. We really wanted to make time to talk about those current events. So um Taylor says, but I do have an edible cookie. I do have edible cookie dough. Okay.
Yeah, and good thing we didn't push it back again because of the stock market situation.
Oh my gosh, yes, like that could have. Do you want to briefly talk about that for a second, because that's pretty significant?
I know. Oh my god. So what happened was a bunch of stock market hedge fund guys decided that GameStop, AMC, and a couple other stocks they were going to bet against it and make money off it by because when you do these short stop funds, if the stock goes down, you make money. And so these Redditors decided that they were going to go on Robinhood and, and buy a bunch of stocks and force the stock up. So all of these hedge fund people just lost money, and they lost a lot of money to the point of where Robinhood pulled the stock. Oh, it's great.
Oh, the
Oh,
internet.
I love it.
It's almost as hilarious as the whole TikTok sabotage of one of former President Trump's rallies that happened last year. Leo's like, Sheriff of Nottingham investing for some.
You can't I feel like it's because of 2020 we've just lost all subtlety, and we're just now living in an age of where literally Robin Hood is stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. Like, we live in the future.
We do. At least nothing ever seems to get boring anymore, you know. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read our show's mission statement before we get started. So, many witness different atrocities, whether those are large or small, that fray the social fabric around us, and much of the time, many may feel powerless and not know how to address such things. And as this fray has gotten worse with the rise of social media and all of us being able to share in collective trauma as it goes viral, really allows us to experience this collective grief on a mass scale. And that begs the question of what can we do to mend the communities that have seen that tragedy, often which caused by privileged groups who may not be aware that they do have some sort of involvement. So our goal with this show is to restitch the social tapestry of sorts through conversation, creativity, and action, with the whole purpose of educating not only ourselves, but maybe helping perpetuate some bit of information to all of you as well. A lot of this is us learning together, and that's why we really appreciate this show so much, and really enjoy doing it. So tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about social preferences, and we're going to be talking about being an ambivert and what that means to us, how we came to realize this term, and we're obviously going to be sharing a lot of our past experiences as well with regard to like social interaction, and we are going to read a couple of poems too themed around social preferences. So of course, you know that we're going to involve poetry in some way because that's what we do. Um, so, Ari, do you want to start us off by defining what ambivert is, like the actual definition, if you have it?
So an ambivert, it's basically an intermediate between an extrovert and an introvert. But what does that mean, really? Like, so what does it mean to be an introvert, and what does it mean to be an extrovert? And there are signs.
Yeah, like when doing research, I don't know, I'm sure you stumbled across this, and I see that Taylor just mentioned it too, a Venn diagram of social personality theories. I saw a lot of Venn diagrams establishing that introversion and extroversion it's a spectrum in a way of sorts, and everybody wavers along that spectrum or shifts along that spectrum, which I thought was super interesting. I know I could really relate with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like the fact of the matter is that there's just a lot of people who I don't know have like characteristics of both being an introvert and being an extrovert,
Right.
and there needed to be some sort of defining term for that kind of nebulous in between, and that being ambivert. There's also other terms that I discovered too. I think omnivert was another one that I discovered. We could do an entire other episode on that. But
I feel like being an extrovert and an introvert is on a spectrum. And so in the middle, you have like this ambivert, which falls kind of like in the middle, where you have this like gray area of like, do you fall towards the introvert side or do you fall more towards the extrovert side? And in the middle, you have like this like ambivert that's like somewhat in between introvert and extrovert. And so like you have like kind of extrovert, kind of introvert, sort of more, sort of less, but like Ambivert.
right, right. So like obviously like if like we know that being extroverted typically means that a person is extremely like socially active and involved, often enjoying like larger gatherings. One could argue being the life of the party, right? Um,
They gain like a lot of like social they gain a lot of like social power, like a social prowess from like going out. They gain energy from like going out and like talking and like being a people person and like getting they get energy from it and like they feel
yeah,
energized after being having a social interaction, whereas an introvert feels drained after a social interaction.
right, right. And like also like I would argue that extroverts definitely they gain some sort of security and validation out of being surrounded by people and social gatherings, whereas an introvert finds security in independence usually. It's not to suggest that an extrovert doesn't enjoy independence. I'm sure that many extroverts do, but like introverts typically prefer being separate, kind of doing their own thing, largely depending on the situation. So
Mhm.
um, now I know for me, um, like obviously I've always, and this is one of my discussion questions of how did we socially identify prior to discovering this term. I always socially identified as being an introvert because like social gatherings would always make me extremely anxious. I would feel a lot more at ease being separate and doing my own thing because then I could make my own decisions, chart my own path, I guess you could, or you could say. um since I became a teacher, I would argue, and also since I started doing YouTube, I started becoming a bit more extroverted, which is why I would now qualify myself as being an ambivert, because I still lean mostly introverted, but I am capable of taking on characteristics of being extroverted when I need to, depending on the social situation. So, now if you're wondering, like, what different, like, if you're kind of asking yourself, like, how am I, like, am I an ambivert? Like, possibly, I don't know. So I found a source from Forbes that kind of establishes, like, different qualities that ambivert people typically have. And here are those 9 qualities. The first one is I can perform tasks alone or in a group. I don't have much preference either way. So you're capable of navigating teamwork and independent work pretty easily. Social settings don't make me uncomfortable, but I tire of being around people too much. Okay. So you can be social, but sometimes like you need to kind of just withdraw a little bit and recharge. Okay. Being the center of attention is fun, but I don't like it to last. So there is some sort of security gained from knowing that it's a temporary thing. Some people think I'm quiet, while others think I'm highly social. That one really hits close to home for me because when I tell people that I like kind of I'm in between, like everybody's always like, "You seem very extroverted, Donny," and I'm just like, you haven't seen me at home and in pajamas, like coming up with excuses to avoid social interactions. Like, it's too funny. Um, I don't always need to be moving, but too much downtime leaves me feeling bored. That gets to me too. Sometimes too much downtime really, it doesn't make me feel bored necessarily, but it makes me feel lazy, and I don't like feeling lazy, even though I am kind of lazy sometimes, just being honest. Were you gonna add something, Ari?
Yeah, I feel the same way that like I have to have a to-do list sometimes and just like I feel like I have to like be active. And just I have to feel like I'm part of something bigger. Uh, in order to I didn't realize that that was an extroverted activity to be so active. That being an introvert was to be inactive. I didn't realize that that was an introverted, like, tendency.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think, like, I really do think that extroverts and introverts look at being active differently. Like, I know a lot of introverts prefer being active in a virtual sense. For example, they prefer the comfort of a screen protecting them from the outside world. I know that was what really that was my connection to the outer world for a long time, like being able to connect through like virtual chat or video. And I think that's why YouTube was a very easy thing for me to do, because talking to a camera for me is a lot easier than talking to a room full of people, and having that performative quality. Whereas in front of a camera, unless we're, live like right now, like I can just go and edit something out if I don't like it, or I can redo it, or, like there's that security net.
Yeah.
Look, checking out the comments really quick. Leo says, a realist who doesn't identify with any intro, extro, or ambivert group, just does his own thing. That's fair. Leo, are you the type of person that doesn't like labels? That's totally okay. A lot of people don't. Let's see. Taylor says it's important to know you can enjoy something even if it drains you, so that complicates things more. Yes, for sure. I know for me. Oh,
Go
go ahead.
ahead. No, you first.
I was gonna say sometimes I'm not aware that something is draining for me, until afterward, and then I'm just like I just I decompress like like just a balloon,
Yeah. I
What were you
totally
gonna
understand. I was gonna say I just wrote something about this actually. This exact thing for Alien Buddha skips the party, about being an introvert and wanting to participate still in the group activities while still being an introvert and being drained. So I totally understand the experience of still participating while still being like, I can't do this.
It's so interesting how that works. Taylor also says, I'm a charismatic introvert. People perceive me as an extrovert, and I'm 100% not, but I'm very good with people. Yes, I would say that definitely stems from your rhetorical background as well, too. Like, people who have a prowess with that are very good at like demonstrating to people that they are like really involved and invested. And but then later, usually like kind of like having that decompression. I know a lot of people in customer service also typically are in that, as our teachers. So okay, so Leo does love labels. I just literally don't identify with any of the three vert terms. That's totally fair. There's a lot of other vert, I like that, vert terms that are out there too, so there might be one that suits you. Rogue Agent Killer Rodan is here. I'm doing
Yeah.
well. It's good to see you. How are you doing? So, moving on with the rest of that list of different signs of that you're an ambivert. Let's see. I can get lost in my own thoughts just as easily as I can lose myself in a conversation. Yes. Oh my gosh. Definitely. Definitely me. For sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry to
Daydreamer
hear.
tendencies.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, let's see. Small talk doesn't make me uncomfortable, but it does get boring.
Oh, yeah. I love meaningful conversation.
Me too. It really depends on it depends on what subject the small talk is about. Like, weather is a very common form of small talk, but I initiate it a lot because I love talking about weather. So, I like I've actually had people like think that I am trying to skirt around their conversation because I bring up the weather as like filler conversation, when really I do mean it genuinely. like did you see that snowstorm we got? Like
No, I So my sister and my mom love talking about like people and things. And like I'll just sit there and I'll look at them and I'm just like, I have nothing to add to this conversation. So I'll just sit there and I'll just be like waiting for something. And then they'll mention like something like more meaningful. Like they'll talk about like politics or like the state of our country. And then I'm like, yes, finally something to talk about.
Oh yes, if it's something that I can get latched to, like, oh my goodness, I will talk someone's ear off. Like Taylor just mentioned, hi, I just met you. Let's debate theology. Like, I'm that way with politics. I'm sure as hell that way with Godzilla stuff. Oh my God. Like, my partner is very careful to not get me on a Godzilla tangent because I will give you like a breakdown analysis of anything that's Godzilla, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings related, any of that.
Can I just decide about your video about the anti-hero Godzilla was a great video and I loved your analysis and it was like so thoughtful and so great and I just was like this is amazing. I just thought it was like so in-depth and so wonderful and I had to say thank you for that because it was
Oh,
like so great.
thank you. I really appreciate that. I like honestly, I just wanted to make it because uh-oh, here we go. Because a lot of people were upset that Godzilla was being depicted as an antagonist, and I was just like, is Godzilla really a protagonist or an antagonist? Let's delve a little bit deeper and see. So it was my opportunity to nerd out a little bit while also incorporating some literary fun, I suppose.
Yeah, it was great.
I appreciate that. That totally made my day. Thank you. Um, so so there's two more to this list of different identifiers for being an ambivert. When it comes to trusting other people, sometimes I'm skeptical and other times I dive right in. Um, See, that one's interesting because typically I'm a very trusting person. And that's worked to my disadvantage before. It's really gotten me. I'm very optimistic and believe in humans. Maybe that's an extroverted thing. I don't know. But I guess it really depends on the person. It depends on how well I know them too. Um, oh, thank you, Rogue Agent Killer Rodan and Leo. I appreciate it. The last one is if I spend too much time alone, I get bored, yet too much time around other people leaves me feeling drained. That seems pretty similar to another one that was in that list as well. But those are 9 signs that you could potentially be an ambivert. And Taylor does make an interesting point here. And I believe, yeah, this is connected to the trust tidbit. Trust has more to do with your upbringing than anything. Agreed.
Mm-hmm. Read an article too that said that some ambiverts um, have limits to their social comfort zone. So they they have like a limit to like how comfortable they are in social situations. So they can go like they can be in a social situation, but they don't want to be like like going to a party, but like having to have know somebody who's there, or like being in a new situation, or but they have like comfort zones, but they have limits to their comfort zones. Uh, they like to have backup, so like doing something, but they like to have backup in their with what they do. So like they don't like to do stuff by themselves. They like to have backup from other people and thinking before they speak, usually. And they tend to balance the people out around them.
Yep. Oh my gosh, I really could relate with that for sure. Um, it's interesting because like my comfort level in social settings is very like there are conditions that will like push me over the edge where I like am super uncomfortable. Usually if it's a social setting that involves competition, that is my quickest shutdown. Like I do not handle competition very well because it is a different level of performance. At least I perceive it as a different level of performance where success or failure are what's at risk. And if it could risk being humiliated in any way, oh my gosh, that really gets me. So if there is a situation where competition is involved, I either have to remove myself, tell somebody about it, or I have to really read the room to be like, okay, how do I like super quickly adapt to this situation so I don't make an ass of myself? Um, do you have like any specific triggers for social settings that become like too much for you?
Um, New situations in which I'm the only person there, like, I don't know anybody there that, like, is new, like, I have such a hard time with. Like, if I'm going to, like, a conference or something and, like, it's for, like, a work conference and, like, I don't know anybody and, like, the only people there are my coworkers, I have a hard time with stuff like that, because it's, like, a very uncomfortable situation. I have very, like, strict limits about that because, and, like or, like, school conferences like that because, like, it's, like, a very tense situation. I have very, like, strict limits of, like, how long I can be there and, like, how long I can do stuff, because, it's very difficult. Um, I went to, a Comic-Con, and I didn't know anybody there, and, it was just a lot of new people coming in fast. There was, like, 10,000 people at this Comic-Con, and it was just, like, a lot of people coming at me fast, and I was just, like I had very strict limits about how long I could be there, because it was just too many people too fast, and I just couldn't do it.
Right.
So, that was
Yeah.
my limit.
Like it's like I really do think that our social preferences, kind of like what Taylor mentioned earlier, it's all based on our upbringing and the different situations that we've had to adapt to over time. Um, for me, another thing that really is one of my social gathering oddities, let's just say, is I'm always terrified of overstaying my welcome. Like I like and I think it really comes back down to a lot of my own insecurities too, because I always feel like I'm not necessarily burdening people, but I'm always afraid of infringing on other people's time if they need that time for something. So I'm all like, you'll probably, and you've probably heard me make comments like this before too, like, oh, I don't know if you're busy, or like, oh, I'm sorry if you got this going on, or like, I'll try to gauge like how free you are because I will it like engrave in my mind like when I should leave this person alone so they can kind of do their own thing. And that's probably, if I were to think of an origin of that, I think it's because when I was a kid, like I would get over excited about certain things and I would really bug people or annoy people. And I had to kind of like know when it was getting too much for other people and I would just shut up, you know? Um,
I
I
feel
like,
like that now, like, that I bug people and then I'm always like, "Oh, am I bothering you? Am I, like, in the way? Am I doing too much? Like, I'm sorry. Am I, like is this am I okay to, like, be here?"
yep, I'm very much still that way too. And it like it's gotten better for me a little bit because I've learned how to identify it. And it's very much tied to what people call imposter syndrome, like feeling like you don't belong, just even though you do. And we could talk, well, like we could do an entire other episode about imposter syndrome. In fact, we might add that to our list afterward. Who knows? Um, but let's see here. Taylor says there are some weird social constructs in white circles that lead to success failure for people, social comfort wise. Yes, I think so too. Like it's very much performative. I think a lot of it could also have something to do with like social class too. Um And Taylor says, I'm sure there are those for other races, but we don't know them, right? Rogue Killer Agent Rodan is a social butterfly. And Leo says that I can relate to that on a personal level, Donny. Yes. I'm
Um,
glad.
I'm I'm kind of aware of it at some a little bit as far as like race goes, because I've seen a little bit of like that there's a certain amount of like it's not deference necessarily, but like it's like there's a certain amount of burden that that Black people have had to bear because of racism. But I'm not fully aware of it as far because I'm a white person. But it's just like a vague sense of it, but like I can't quite get my mind around it.
Right. Yeah, and that, like, obviously that largely has to do with the fact that we've been like even in our social preferences, there's a significant degree of privilege, and like social circles just influence, like they condition people that inhabit them. So Arpy says, I'm more talkative around people if I'm more comfortable with them. Not sure if that makes me an ambivert. Um, it could, depending on the situation, I would say. Let's see. Do. Um, so question for you, Ari. What what did it take for you to discover that you're an ambivert? What was the catalyst?
So it was after college, because mostly up until through college, I thought I was an introvert because one, I had a very small group of friends. Like I had people that were I considered acquaintances or people who were just like on the periphery. But for the most part, I kept a very small group of friends. I was considered kind of bookish. I did a lot of stuff online that was considered nerdy. Was very like just very like quiet, and I watched YouTube videos a lot, and I didn't make a whole lot of waves. I exercised a lot, but like I did things that were like solitary sports like jogging. I didn't do like activities like sports or anything like that. So I they were like introverted sports, introverted things. So I wasn't I felt introverted. I thought I was introverted. But like I didn't I would do things like I could talk to people, and I took a field of study that was journalism, which makes you have to talk to people, and I would talk to people, so I knew that I was able to talk to people. So I knew that like I had the ability to talk to people when I needed to. So I knew that I had a vague sense that I wasn't quite an introvert, but I didn't have a word for it until after college.
Same here. I really didn't discover that I was an ambivert until my master's program when I started teaching. I like as excited as I was to start teaching, I was utterly terrified of standing in front of a classroom with people who were just a few years younger than me, and like, because I really had never had any authority like respected. Like I've never really had any authority before. So when I learned how to demonstrate some degree of leadership and authority, I really had to force myself to, because it was either do that or face constant crippling anxiety. And I guess I got used to it at a certain point. Now when I'm teaching, I don't get nervous anymore like I used to. Um, I mean, it really depends on like the class also that I have. Like there are like each class that a person teaches has a different dynamic for sure. Um, but like that's what really was the big catalyst for me. But I do think that YouTube, like my biggest weakness prior to doing YouTube videos is I would always have a really difficult time explaining myself. when I was a teenager, like I would have like if say like I'm in a classroom setting, I would have something to contribute, but because of the performative pressure, I would immediately not know how to articulate what I needed to contribute. And it often came off extremely awkward. Nobody would understand what I was trying to say. And then I would just get frustrated at myself and
For the
just
miscommunication.
exactly. And then when I started doing YouTube, like I really believe that my communicative skills improved because I was able to more quickly start explaining myself and elaborating my thought processes. So, like, I know a lot of people tend to, like, if I explain to people, like, oh, YouTube has been a very significant social builder for me, a lot of people will scoff at that and be like, social media, that's ridiculous. But the truth is, for a lot of millennials, especially, social media was what helped us
Yeah.
make connections and so on and so forth.
It really helped me slow down my thought process and, like, help me, really think through my thoughts more and just, like, really put into words, like, what I was thinking and just, like, help me, like, build my communication skills as far as, like, just orally, like, just saying what I needed to say, um, and it just, like, because I would just, like, and I do it now. I just sit there and I'll just talk for like 20 minutes and then I'll just delete everything that I don't need to say.
I do that too sometimes. So, um, Leo says, I fear an occasion of overstaying my welcome because I focus on making people happy. I was taught almost toxically so that I need to make people happy. Otherwise, I feel unloved, if that makes sense. So it's very much tied to a validation type of thing, right? Um, I can kind of relate to that too. Arpy says, I used to be talkative around everyone when I was little. That's interesting. David says, I've grown into more of an ambivert. I guess partly pushing myself to more surroundings and experiences that has helped a lot through life. I think there is this, like, I really feel like this is a Western, like a Western thing, okay? Where there is this pressure because we're so much focused on the assembly line that is the working world, right? There is this pressure to get out and get involved and do what you need to do, make that difference, leave that mark, live that quote unquote American dream, at least here in the United States, you know?
Mhm.
So I do think there is a lot of pressure to be social because a lot of people who aren't social are often dismissed as, oh, well, that person's, you know, a mean person, or, you know, they are like just rude, you know, like disrespectful in some way, when a lot of people just don't understand that um, people's performative preferences and their social preferences are a spectrum, right?
Like social with like networking for networking reasons.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, interestingly, I really feel like since I've learned about introversion, extroversion, and being an ambivert, I feel like I've become more understanding of other people's social aspects too. Because I think because we get so used to what we go through, we don't really take enough time to think about other people's social preferences and processes. So now I like, depending on the situation, like I may be apt to ask the question of like, hey, is this socially okay for you to engage in? Like, is this comfortable for you, right? Because I always want to be aware of people's comfort levels, because being that person who is often forced into situations that were extremely uncomfortable, like I would never want to impose that on someone else without at least demonstrating that I care first, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's just better, like, we've become a society where it's okay, like, that I feel like we went from, like, the 50s where it was, like, you were like socially like pariah if you didn't go to the party every weekend with everybody else, and like do you didn't put on the hair and the makeup and the dress, or you didn't put on the suit and the tie and, you know, pair off with somebody and go do the thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, go on a date every weekend and like it's just that like I feel like we've become like less like strict on our society, like of like what you have to do as far as like people. um but like I feel like, we still, yeah, I miss going to parties too, Killer Rodan. But like,
As a person that used to really hate going to clubs and parties, because it's been so long, I miss them too. Like it's gotten to the point where even I miss them, which is really significant.
I just
Um,
miss being invited to a party and just like maybe just like a viewing party where we can just watch like something and just like chill out and have some
Monster movie
pillows.
Mondays.
Just have like a monster movie Monday.
Oh, I do miss those so much.
Yeah.
Taylor says, literally, my whole family is a charismatic introvert. I was taught growing up that everything is a socio-political game, and you have to play the game to get anywhere. Interesting. That is a good point. That is a very good point.
I I did go to a party during coronavirus though.
Leo, I was just laughing at that. You did.
I did, yeah. It was we're gonna aside here for a second. I did go to a party during coronavirus. It was a baby shower. And I was wearing a mask, but there were people there who were not wearing masks.
I went to a family gathering um, during like earlier on in the pandemic. Yeah, and I wore a mask too, so I get it.
I stayed
Um,
for I stayed for about an hour and I was like,
yeah,
I
I
gotta
didn't stay
go.
long either
Social
'cause
limits.
yeah, it was very like I tried social distancing too, and everybody was just like, "Donny, why are you being such an unsociable creature?" Um, Taylor says, "Donny, you better go to my shower then if you miss parties so I can bitch about it later." You know what? If I had no other reason to go, obviously, I would go just for that because I love it when people spill the tea, of course. That's what the kids these days are saying, right? Or
Spill
was
the
that
tea.
or was
Spill the
that
tea.
or was that years ago already?
I don't know.
Um, but
Here's
so
the tea.
I love it. So now like I do want to kind of take us on a brief deep dive. So of people who might be an ambivert and some other signs. There is another source from Healthline that I found particularly interesting, and it says that some signs that you might be an ambivert. They list five. Their first sign is that you are a good listener and communicator at the same time, because when it comes to the extremes of extroversion and introversion, extroverts typically prefer to speak more, whereas introverts prefer to often observe and listen. Ambiverts have a pretty good balance between the two. You have the ability to regulate and adapt behavior depending on the social situation. You feel comfortable in social settings, but value your own alone time, which connects back to the other list that we were talking about. Empathy comes naturally to you. So, this article argues that ambiverts are able to listen and show they understand verbally as well, um, kind of to establish that they know where the person is coming from. And then, last but not least, ambiverts typically are very good at providing balance in social situations when there is a dynamic of different extremes in that social situation. So I thought that was super neat. That was super neat.
Yeah, I think ambiverts build trust too. I feel like they're very trustworthy.
Yeah. Agreed, for sure. So, do we want to do our poetry segment?
Yeah, you want to go first?
I would love to go first. Okay, so it feels really surreal busting out the old book for this. I love it. It makes me
You just
happy.
passed your 4-month anniversary, didn't you?
I did, yes. It's so weird thinking of that. It's been 4 months since my book came out. Shameless plug for both Ari and I. If you would like to get my book, it is Carbon Footprint and it's on Amazon. Would you like to do a plug for yours?
Yeah, I have a copy of it right here. Hang on.
Please do. Support um, small publications. We really appreciate the support.
Oh.
Ari's book, Full of Now, is on Amazon as well. And it's almost been out for an entire month. Isn't that hard to believe?
I know, my baby.
David asks, are either available as ebooks? Sadly not. Sadly
No,
not.
not yet. Not yet.
Although I keep pestering our publisher about that. He's probably getting annoyed at me. But hey, I'm just so excited. Like I've had many people ask about, I've had probably a dozen people ask about ebooks. So Taylor says, I wish my baby was out. A few more months to go. You got this.
It'll be here
And
soon
Rogue
enough.
Agent Rodan, I did see that email. I loved that drawing, by the way. Sorry that I didn't get to respond to it. All right, so I will start off our poetry segment. In my collection, there is at least a couple of poems about being introverted. And there was this one day where I was really angry about people getting upset at me for being an introvert because I've lost friendships over it before, honestly. Like there have been people who have been like, well, you didn't come to this party, like, bye, Donny. So it would really it was a point of insecurity for a while. So this poem is titled Introverts Wearing War Paint. Smiles smeared across faces are mud streaks, blood stains, and cold abrasions left untreated from our past battles. Party streamers fall in a cacophony of whispers and tether us to hollow celebrations as we tell our inner coward to sit down and shut the fuck up. I don't drop the F-bomb in a lot of poems, but this one I definitely did. Knowing what to say, when to say it, and how to say it are dust-covered bombs waiting to blow as unfamiliar facial expressions shoot rounds through chests. Our friends are untrained field medics and can't see the wounds left behind by the host's shrapnel side glances or strategic exits. We bite our lips raw and hope real blood may airlift us out, but our signals don't make it past buffet tables. We cower in corners, avoid question raids, stock up on our friends' half-smile rations, and nod ourselves into a stealth-programmed rage.
So good.
Thank you. Taylor says, ironic that we're considered the talkers in meetings. Yes. We are definitely the talkers in faculty meetings. And thank you, Arby. I appreciate you saying that. So, Ari. Okay, so Ari deserves all the Ari deserves a Grammy, an Emmy, and any award possible because
No,
they wrote this
no.
poem in just a few minutes, and I aspire to that level of writing capability.
Oh, no, you
So
can do this. It's totally fine. I I was like because first of all, I write 6 poems a day. And I
mhm.
will just like scribble down some bars and just whatever. And I was like, I hadn't written my 6th poem today, and I was like, I'll just quickly, I've got a few minutes before the program starts, I'll just write some lines about being an ambivert. And so we were sitting there, and I was like, "Oh, I'm done." And he was like, "Let me hear it." And I was like, I told it to him, and he was like, "Oh, it's so good." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
I
So I
like
guess.
I was just like
Anyway, just listen for yourself and decide whether or not it's good. But it's called Just an Ambivert. Going out in bars, but only with friends, and only as long as this wicked heart will last. I am tired, and these times more strained. Would I be a public speaker? Oh my, no, but I would shake hands and say hello and get to know you neighbor to neighbor, on each face a name and story, and read my little books and tell my little stories. Sometimes it's all too much, and I stand in the corner of the room finding out what to do, and then there you'll find me, just an ambivert making do.
yes. Yes. That was good. Oh, I love it. I love it. I think the one thing that I really appreciate about our dynamic, Ari, is that we're always super validating of one another, and it's so refreshing. Um, so now that our brief poetry segment has come and gone, do you have any discussion questions from your notes that you would like to pose?
Yeah, we were supposed to start a new document today, and that didn't happen. So we have 2 sets of notes.
Yeah, our document is extremely long. That's a my bad.
And it crashes my computer. Like I can't do the streaming and do the notes because it crashes. So
So the funny thing, okay, so we like Ari and I are very elaborate with note taking, probably because we are nerdy writers, right? But like we are on document number 3 of our show, where and most of our documents are like what they've got to be at least 20 pages each, right?
yes.
I think the first one was like 30 pages. So we got to a point where we were like, this is too much to scroll through. We we need to
It
make more
When it gets to the
documents.
end, it always crashes my computer. Like I can't handle it. Thank you, Taylor, for your kind words about my poetry. I appreciate it, by the way. You're amazing. Okay, so here are the questions I have for the discussion. What are the benefits of being an introvert to you?
The benefits to me, um, I love my ability to adapt to social situations. I like even though some social situations may make me uncomfortable, I am very good at just going with the flow and let's just say proving that I am capable of navigating those waters, if that makes sense. Like that's been very that's been confidence building for me in a way. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah. I feel like it's good for me because like I'm good with like one-on-one interactions, and like I feel like I can do that for like quite a while. More than like an introvert would. That I can like talk to like a large number of people for a long period of time. And I feel like that helps me. Like I could have like a lot of like serious interpersonal relationships, um, which would help me if I were like a salesperson or something. If I wanted to do sales, but I don't do sales. But like if I wanted to do something that were like in a sales position, I would be really good at it. But I would never do that. But like I would be really good at talking to a large number of people one on one for a long period of time. Uh, and I'm really good. Well, I feel like I'm really good at like just listening to people and giving my advice. It's not always the best advice, but I give my advice.
It's interesting that you talked about that, the balance too, in a way, because for me, being an ambivert has allowed me, like, it's helped me multitask in social settings more effectively, in the sense that I've improved at being able to participate in a social setting while at the same time closely observing people too, to pick up on like cues and so on and so forth.
What are the drawbacks of being an ambivert, though? Here's one. What are the cons of being an ambivert?
Do you want to go first for this one?
I feel like it's like being the middle child. Like you don't always stick out very much. Like sometimes you're kind of like fade into the background a little bit. Like introverts, they have their own thing and they like will separate themselves and they'll just like they kind of are known for like being kind of like an isolationist. And so they have their own thing and so they have their own separate group and so they're kind of well known for that and so people like will respect them for that. And then you have their extroverts which are like kind of flashy, and then you have ambiverts which are kind of like just like people. And so like they kind of just like sort of fade into the background, and so people are kind of, for a long time they were just like they're just people. They're not introverted, they're not extroverted, they're just people.
Right. For me, probably the greatest disadvantage to being an ambivert is a lot of people will not a lot of people. Some people will pick up, especially introverts. Introverts are very good at picking up on social nuances because they observe so much. People will observe me adapting from one situation to another and think that there's some sort of lack of being genuine because of that ability to adapt. Like it almost seems like I'm doing it to pander to people in a way sometimes, whereas it's simply like I always have felt that social settings are like surfing, right? You ride the waves and kind of like they're rapids in a way, right? You can either crash and fall in the water, or you can gracefully get through it. Um, and and usually, like, if anybody's ever thought of it as being like a lack of genuine quality, like they are more than willing to have a conversation about it. And I'm just like, hey, this is just like, to me, it's respecting the social situation by adapting to it as an ambivert, because it demonstrates that I am still staying true to myself, but also, investing something to demonstrate that I am there in some fashion, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. That's a pretty good one. So what activities do you like to do as an ambivert? Like if there's an activity that you would say is like an ambivert activity, what would you say is an ambivert activity? And what would you say you avoid doing as an ambivert, a
Oh,
follow-up?
this is so easy to answer for me. For me, an ambivert activity is an activity that involves conversation, but also like dinner or something like that. Like, or you're like watching something, a viewing party, um, or like a concert or poetry reading, something where you can kind of like engage, but also for a few moments detach and observe something happening on the outside, if that makes sense. For me, what I try to avoid situations that warrant competition 100%, because that changes the nature of the performance. And heaven forbid it be a team game or a team competition, because then everyone, like other people's success might depend on my capabilities, or that might be impacted by my lack of capability. So like adding in those variables, it's very anxiety inducing for me, and something I'm working on in therapy, thankfully. So how about you?
Um, so I think that like watching a movie and then talking about the movie afterwards and like having it be kind of like a small group of people, like maybe like probably like less than seven. Seven people would probably be like a max number of people I would say I'd want in a group. Um, that would be like total number of people in the group. Uh, that would probably be like an ideal number of like that would be large um, to discuss the movie. And then um, maybe like a picnic that would be like good to sit around, have some nice food, sit outside, do some outdoor stuff, maybe do some like cornhole, the game cornhole where you throw some
Oh yeah.
beanbags around and stuff.
Yeah, if it's a simple game, I do enjoy it. Like a simple game like that. Um
Where it's like it's not really competition, it's just where you're like playing.
that you're just doing something for the fun of it. You're just,
Right.
yeah, nobody's against each other. It's just,
It's just like you're not really like
yeah.
even like you're not even like taking score, you're just like throwing beanbags.
Yep.
It's just
I can relate
or
with
like
that.
playing horseshoes or like something simple.
Yep.
Like
Oh my goodness.
uh and it's not like this is a game to the death because it's a small group of people, one, and two, it's not like this is like end of the world stuff. And if you get a certain group of people, like they're not going to be like super into it and like super like you get that vibe of like it's a nice summer day, everybody's just being chill, you're sort of playing but you're not really playing, just having a
It's
fun
more so
time.
the ambiance that's significant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a question. I have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
Um, so have you ever had people impose social or antisocial issues on you or events on you?
Antisocial events?
Meaning, have you ever had people kind of coax you into isolating yourself from a group?
Um, yeah,
That's kind of a complicated
I've
question.
been to events where it's been like I felt so uncomfortable being there. I ended up just sitting in a corner, and it's usually family events. And
Yep, same.
it's it's not fun.
For me, events that are very cliquey, like there are like literal groups of people that prefer each other's company. Like if I pick up on that, like that, like kind of coaxes me into isolating myself at that social event. Um, and of course, I've had people impose social events on me so many different times. Like that, I would need like a novel to describe all of those. But probably my worst experience that I can think of a forced social event is one time I was forced into playing a card game with a guy that I really liked and two of our mutual friends. And I was still at this point where I was still trying to impress the guy. I was still trying to demonstrate that I am, in fact, a competent human being. And card games are my greatest weakness. I cannot remember what card game it was. I do remember that it involved recognizing patterns in the types of cards based on whether they were like spades or diamonds, but also based on like the numbers, the pairings. So like there were two different variables that I had to monitor, and that's really difficult for me, and it involved math. And we were on a team, and I ended up we lost dismally because of me. And basically in this group, like this guy that I was with was literally like making gestures at my friends, being like, "Who is this stupid idiot?" Like, "Oh my god," right in front of me. And
Oh no, that's
it was like that.
awful.
Yeah,
I couldn't handle
it
that.
was
I
like,
would like die.
oh, I like I was able to somehow maintain my composure, but later when I was alone, like I was so upset. Like I went
I'm
home and
so
I did not.
sorry. I couldn't handle that. I would crawl under a rock and die.
Yeah, like public humiliation with regard to events like that is really difficult for me. That's why like if
Oh
somebody even like flashes a deck of cards, I'm just like, "Ah." Like,
no.
goodness.
I can handle card games, but I yeah, I was in Florida, my sister had Cards Against Humanity, and we didn't play at all the whole time we were there, and it was like,
Oh, I
don't make
actually love that game.
us I
The only games that I can really do that are card games are that and Uno.
I can do apples to apples too, but I have to
Oh,
be in the right mood for it too. Apples to apples is
yeah,
basically just the nice version of Cards Against Humanity.
yeah. Any chance that I can get, I would rather be more socially unacceptable with Cards Against Humanity.
God forbid I
Yeah,
would challenge this to a duel against Yu-Gi-Oh!
Leo, oh my god. Okay, so we're probably gonna be going up to, like, an hour and 15 minutes tonight, but Leo, my brother was into Yu-Gi-Oh! And tried teaching me how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And it literally makes 0 sense to me. So, like, the fact like, I think for me, like, if there's just multiple patterns and layers to something like that, like, I have to be able to visualize it and then write it down. Like, if I write it down as notes, then I can memorize it, and then I can do it. That's actually what I did with the Pokemon trading card game. I had to write out the process. And then once I knew the process, I was like, all right, here we go.
I've tried on
But my
several
brother would,
occasions. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, my brother used to get so annoyed at me because I wouldn't play Yu Gi Oh! Because I was just like, what is this? What are we doing? This is a monster. There's things on this card. What does it mean? Anyway, what were you going to say?
I was tried on several occasions to get into Magic the Gathering, and I have failed spectacularly because I always play against like the biggest, nerdiest nerds, and I'm so bad compared to them. And like because I was assigned female at birth, there is like this like disparaging like they have to put me in my place. So like every time I go to competitions, it's always like, who are you to sit here and say that you're gonna play magic against us men? Like,
Oh,
and so
mansplaining.
it's like, do dead. Like, oh, I guess I shouldn't play.
That is horrible. Like that is ridiculous. Such fragility.
And I was just like, I guess I shouldn't play. I just wasted $20 on this competition with these cards. They're pretty cards. I guess I'll just hold my cards and be sad.
Oh, I would have played Magic with you, or at least tried, in a non-mansplaining way.
Remember when we used to play Magic in college?
Yes, I remember being really bad at it. Like, I was just like, I don't know, flailing around and not knowing what I was doing.
I had so much fun playing Magic with you in college. We wouldn't, Jalera and I would play Magic.
Yeah, like we would just sit in like the lobby of a lobby, or we would go to the coffee shop. Yeah, that was
And
so much
Walt,
fun.
we would sit in Walt and play Magic.
Oh, I do kind of miss those days. And then we would watch a movie or something, or that
Yeah,
was like
ages
12
ago.
that was like 12 years ago. It like, oh my gosh, my mind is numb right now. Um, when it comes to like social interaction, like or uncomfortable gaming situations, another one that's really uncomfortable for me, oh, what was it? Sports, definitely not my strong suit. Mm-mm.
When I was,
Nope.
like, little, like, in middle school and elementary school, I was really good at sports. Like, I would play all the time, but then because it was fun and, like, they would keep score, but it wasn't, like, the most serious thing, but then when it became, like, competitive, like, you were playing against other schools, and then it became, like, a big deal, that's when it became, like, not fun for me, and I just didn't wanna do it.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel too. Like I know like when it came like it got more competitive the older I got. And I don't have enough competitive spirit in me to want to kick a ball around or throw a ball at, whatever, So, but I remember the other one. And this is a
Because
surprise.
it became the thing that defined you. You became an athlete, and it was like, you couldn't just play sports, you had to become an athlete.
Yep. And depending on the sport, it's tied to your degree of masculinity or femininity, your performative capability in those own social groups too. And I didn't want to be in that binary, if that makes sense, because to me that's what got like there were just so many associations and conditions. Um the other one, this is going to really surprise you, but the other game that is a huge weakness for me, live action role play, or like board tap role playing. I love stories and I love telling stories, but if it's a new type of role play and I don't know the rules and the storyteller doesn't explain the rules, like I'll always try to be like innovative with my character and try to do something, and then they'll be like, "No, you can't do that. No, don't do that. Why would you do that? That's stupid." Brr." And I'm just like, "All right, my character will sit here in a chair and do nothing."
Oh my god. I used to LARP all the time, and it would require me reading so many books. I read so many LARP books, and I would play these characters and I would make characters, and then I would end up sitting at these tables and there would be like one person who always like did all of the action, and I just ended up not doing a single thing the whole session. And I was like, why did I just read a 350-page book?
Right? Or because I used to write a lot of fiction, I was always like, I want to develop my character. I want to do something that's meaningful that will help unearth a layer from my character. Well, if your character isn't allowed to do anything, how the hell are you supposed to do that, right? So it got to the point where it just became very socially taxing for me to even do like LARP or like role playing or anything. Like
But
just
I
even if
had
it's like
in
tabletop.
the last couple years, the last few times I've LARPed, I've had a really good experience. I did a text LARP with Alex. Uh, Alex, he was my DM, and that was a really good experience. But then it fell apart, and I was really sad. And I was
Oh.
like, "No, don't fall apart. I'm here. No." And I
Well,
was,
it really does depend on the group of people you're with. Like if there is a social threshold that's difficult for you, like it could potentially not be depending on those people surrounding you.
yeah.
So, all right, so final question for tonight. What advice do you have for people navigating social or independent situations slash phases?
Wait, read that again.
What advice do you have for people who are navigating social or independent situations or phases?
Oh, what advice do I have?
Hmm.
Uh, so the best advice I have if you're navigating a social situation is just be yourself. That's always the best advice I have. Um, if you don't want to talk to somebody, don't. If you don't, if you're an introvert and you feel like you're uncomfortable and just want to hold back, do that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Um, if you're an ambivert and you feel like you can have more social momentum and you're good for a little while and can talk to people, but then you kind of fall off after a while, do that. If you're an extrovert and are really talkative, do that. But nobody's gonna blame you when you walk away because we each have our social gauges, we each have our social abilities. And if they don't understand that, if they think that like you're a bad person for walking away from a social situation because you're like, hey, I'm tapped out, then that's their problem, not yours.
Yeah, that's
Like,
so important.
like, I mean, you can only do what you can do as a person. And like we
Yeah.
each have our own ability to manage a social situation. And this goes in like work situations too, I think. Like we only have our can only do what we can do in our as far as our abilities. And I feel like bosses really need to take kind of like a stance on this as far as like asking only what they can of their employees as far as like what a person is comfortable with. And like I feel like bosses don't really think about like they ask a lot of their employees as far as like social things, and they don't really think about like maybe my employee may not necessarily be able to be like as far as like customer service jobs too, they don't always think like, hey, my employee may not be able to perform all of these activities up to par. And like some employees may be like able to do all of these things because they're extroverts, but like some of these employees may not be able to like be meeting all of these standards because they're not extroverts. And so like maybe like setting a lower threshold level um to accommodate the introverts on your team would be better.
That's perfect advice. I think that's perfect advice, actually. If I were to have any, like, if I were to answer that question too, I would say, don't be afraid. Like, if you're not an ambivert, see how far you're willing to go when it comes to experimenting with adapting to different scenarios. How far will that adaptation take you? What boundaries are you willing to set for yourself? And this goes for both introverts and extroverts. Like, I think everybody shouldn't be shamed for boundaries that they want to create for themselves when it comes to social situations. Um, because, like, one of my biggest regrets is that I allowed so many people to shame me, and I would internalize it, and it would really, it's largely shaped many of my insecurities that I have today, for sure. So, like, that would be my parting words for that. So, well, I think we are coming toward the end here. I think this is the longest we've gone in an episode. So, record, woo. All right, dear friends. So, um, we hope that you have a wonderful weekend. We, of course, join us again next week, Friday at 8:30 p.m. because we will be doing our next episode. And if you're interested, don't forget to subscribe to our channels. Mine is Donny Winter. Ari's is Strange Nothings. And be well. Okay. Ari, any parting words before we leave?
I do what you gotta do. And Yeah, live your life.
And don't be shamed by people. Don't be
Don't be
shamed.
shamed by people.
All right, everyone. We love you, and you have a good night tonight. Bye.